And everybody's here, so before we start the meeting, I have to do a disclaimer. Or do you want to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Dana and I worked together, I don't know how many decades ago, when he was the
20 years ago.
North Fond du Lac Fire Chief, and I was the Director of Administration for Fond du Lac County.
So we do know each other from years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
So before the recording, we're gonna get some good stories about each other.
The best boss ever, and that's what I heard.
No, we worked a lot on the communications
Yeah,
system.
communications 911,
Yeah.
just all
Yeah,
the peripheral, like 30,000.
because I came in after Tiburon was installed,
Yeah.
I worked on the interfaces and getting MDCs and printers and cars, and then also was the project leader for the new communications system. So that's how we know each other.
Saw it from years ago.
It's 7 o'clock. So, I'd like to call the meeting to order, do a roll call. Vandenbrink.
Here.
Ortula.
Here.
Iverson.
Here.
Page.
Here.
What's your name? Godsky?
Here.
Schatzinger.
Here.
Soren here.
Yeah.
A motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Doug, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Gary. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We don't have anyone here for public comment, I don't believe. Who is this person?
Firefighter Ron, he's just here, he's my IT person.
Oh, okay. Do you want to comment?
What's that?
Does he want to comment?
No,
He's just hanging.
no, I just need to do something.
So we have a special order of business, and we have strategic management and consulting as one of the two firms we chose to listen to tonight. They have 15 minutes for the presentation, and then we have up to 15 minutes for questions. So have at it, guys.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone, and thanks for choosing us as one of the finalists. When we first submitted the paperwork, you should have something that looks similar to this. And that has a lot more detail on what we're talking about tonight. Tonight we're just looking at that 30,000 foot view, but certainly willing to answer any detailed questions that you have. Brief history on who we are. We are a Wisconsin-based company. Dan Williams, anybody know Dan Williams or hear of him from before?
I've heard of the name.
Okay, so he used to be the state EMS Bureau Chief for a number of years. That's where he and I actually first met, and that was a number of years ago before probably even we knew each other. And he went on to a few more careers, and his resume is in this packet. About 5 or 6 years ago, we were approached and said, hey, you guys are always working on different projects. Can you work on something together? And we said, sure, what do you want? And they were looking for a leadership class because though we have some great EMS providers in the state and though we have some great firefighters in the state, we really have no organized program to promote them up based on beyond self-study. There's the occasional class put out by a college on going from this level to this level, but really not leadership or management classes. So we contracted with them and created a curriculum. And then they said, hey, since you created the curriculum, would you like to teach it? And we're like, sure. We had the bid on it. So we got the bid, and we had it for 1 year. It was very successful. Had some good comments back, so they opened it up for 5 years to bid on it. So we bid on it, and we're after next week, that'll be our third year in this 5-year contract. So it's for EMS, fire. Doesn't matter if you're career, volunteer, everybody in between. That's kind of how we got started with this. From there, people said, hey, while you're doing that, can you come to our department and do whatever it is? Some just needed help with budgets. We don't know how to budget, so can you work with us? And so we work side by side with them. Others want an actual study, comprehensive study, which is what you guys requested. Some wanted a step-by-step plan. We already know the direction we're going. We just don't know how to get there. What's step 1? What's step 2? What's step 3? So we've done a multitude of those studies and helps. We created a couple help guides because people were just asking about how do you do this. So for those that have EMS associated with them, a lot of people ask questions about how do we bill Medicare and Medicaid? What's accepting assignment? What's this? What's that? So we actually created a document that says here's how we do this. we created a document that helps volunteer fire and EMS. We're lacking volunteers, we're lacking staff, what do we do? So we actually created some documents that are being used around the state. So that just kind of, we started to grow, we've done multiple studies, we added 2 new people, and I'm going to introduce the people in just a couple minutes, who's currently working with strategic management, and we're just constantly going more and more. I like our mission statement, which is to provide unique and out-of-the-box ideas and solutions to issues that affect fire and EMS in today's complex environment. There's sometimes a simple solution and sometimes a very, very complicated solution. You would think of these easy as coming from stuff and stuff too, and sometimes there isn't. But we like to specialize in, some people want to do option A, some people want to do option B, but at the end of the day, maybe option C is the best. So we do really try to look at some of the outside the box thinking that's there. So with that, we'll keep going on. This is my partial resume. If you look on page 11 of the big picture here, you'll see, I mean, we have tons and tons. Thank you very much. Needless to say, there's been 31 years of experience in fire and EMS, both throughout our whole life. It's probably split about 50-50, all walks of life, whether it's a volunteer department, combination, paid on call. We did a resident program where I lived at a fire department for 3 years. We had unique apartments hooked up to the fire department, so we volunteered for some time. One of the funner times of my career. Lots of EMS experience as well, including working for the state DHS as well. Jesse's with us tonight. He's an associate consultant who's been added to the team for the past couple of years. He's got about 24 years of experience. He's full-time with Dubuque Fire. So he's got some out-of-state experience, and we like to have in-state experience because we're like, Dan and I know what the rules and regulations are within the state. But it's nice to get different perspectives from other people, because sometimes you're like, hey, what do you, even though it's like just a river that keeps us separated, right, Mississippi River between Wisconsin and Iowa, sometimes there's worlds of difference of thought. And you go, well, wait a second, how, here's how we're looking at it, and they might come in and go, well, we solved that problem like 5 years ago by doing this. So sometimes it's nice to get an outside perspective. And Jesse's been active as a lieutenant, and rides on ladder truck, hazmat, ambulance, all the above. And he's an instructor. He's also the program director for the tech college there. So he's in charge of all the continuing education and initial education, so he helps with the educational component side. Nick Siemens is 22 years of experience. He was out in Cheyenne Fire for a number of years, as well as in Iowa. He's got his master's degree, tons of education behind him, and we also use him for some of those creative out-of-the-box thinking as well. And lastly, we have Dan Williams. Dan was the co-founder of this company because he took another job with the state. He was there as the EMS bureau chief, and you usually think you only go through once, and by the time you've had enough headaches, you never want to go back. But they wrote a job description for him as the rural EMS coordinator for the state of Wisconsin, and they asked him back. So he has to hang back on the EMS-related side of the studies that we do, but for the fire side, which is what you guys are going to be, he's allowed to be more involved with that, just so that there's no conflict of interest with his current position.
He's from Door County, that's where I know him.
Yeah, he's Door County Emergency Management Director, Ambulance Service Director for 25 years, still lives in Sturgeon Bay there. And he was planning to be here tonight, sent his apologies, but they had a couple state issues come up. But he would be one of the people that is also active with the study. He was also active with the Ripon EMS study. As far as some of the study that we did, he and I both worked on it, and then he did some of the implementation. He actually came down here and was working with the service director then for some time, just to kind of get them acclimated to EMS, which is something we do too, is where we help with some of the implementation, if that's what you would like. His resume is on page 12. So from pages 11 to 13, that's all our detailed resume, a lot more information. You're certainly welcome to read through that. So on page 5, you can read through specifically what we will be doing. under the specific or general understanding. We're going to analyze what the current operations are, what's happening, what your service delivery is, looking at the governance for the different entities that are involved, what the contracts and agreements are, looking at the current staffing as well as what proposed staffing would be, looking at potential salaries, wages, and I will tell you, what we said last year is totally different than today. Post-COVID has driven things totally different. It's I call them pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID. There's literally 3 different ranges or rates that we used to get, because pre-COVID you could have somebody hired on at a part-time, paid on call, full-time career at a certain rate, and it was a good rate. Now, post-COVID, those rates, they're not even on the table anymore. They're almost laughable. When people are like, yeah, I could go work at Quick Trip for that. So that's a big deal. It's a huge issue that all municipalities are struggling with right now, is finances. Is I could have no training and education and go work somewhere for a lot more money than working at a fire department or ambulance service. So we'll discuss that in there. We'll talk about some of the fiscal analysis and implications, because obviously you still got to pay the bills, right? You still got to pay for salaries, you got to pay for the building, you got to pay for stuff. How do you do that and not lose money? And then we'll just discuss some of the planning for growth. So on the next 2 pages after that, we really get into some of the details. These details are basically based on the request for proposal that you guys sent out. And we can certainly go into any of those details that you want to, but nonetheless, I know it's a 5-year study, but there were a few references in here to 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, which is fine. We understand that, we look at where do you really want to go many years from now, and then what's the roadmap from here to 5 years from now, right? Because by 5 years, lots will change again, and then you'll have to be, what do we do from there? Where do we go? I like to put this in, it's a little easier wording for me. What are we trying to do? Well, you guys want to provide the best fire and EMS coverage around, right? Now, I know this is a fire department study, but we got to realize that EMS is also a growing faction. They're also having concerns. And what we're seeing across many areas is a combination of fire and EMS, if nothing else, working collaboratively together, and in other areas actually combining together. So we don't know yet, because we haven't done the study, we haven't researched and talked about to see what would fit and what the support would be, if any. But just understanding that certainly that's an option that is more trending now, than ever before. So we want to provide that best coverage. We want to provide it with the highest quality of service, right? You want to make sure it's done right, done correctly, and you have to temper that or balance that with being fiscally responsible. You want to make sure that you can actually afford all the new vehicles that are out there, all the new rigs that you're going to be looking at, maintaining the building that you have. And it's getting tougher and tougher. I mean, every day you're reading newspaper articles on many towns, cities, villages struggling to pay the bills for fire and EMS. It's coming to a head here. Lots of things are going on throughout the state, throughout the nation that are driving that. But we're going to come up with some solutions that will help you look towards being fiscally responsible. So what do we do? What are we going to do? The process here is we're going to be asking for a bunch of documents. And to the people that we ask the documents from, it's like we're having an inquisition here. And so I want to be very clear and upfront. We're not looking for the negative, we're not looking for skeletons in the closet, we're not looking for that type of stuff, because everybody always takes it like, well, holy smokes, why do I have to give you all this? We don't take it all and then put it on the website and publicize it to the world. No, we consider this a confidential agreement where we're working with the group. We get all the information so we can learn as quickly as possible what the strengths are, right, of the service, and the opportunities that there are for growth for the service. What threats might be out there, either internally or externally, that can cause the service not to be the best service that they can be. So that's what we're concerned about, but we research all that material, looking at all the great things that that are currently going on, and then saying, well, how do you maintain that for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Looking at those things and say, well, here's some areas, not necessarily bad, but definitely room for opportunity for growth. And so we'll go through that and discuss. So just want to be clear, as we're asking for that information, as we do the one-on-one interviews, and that will be based on who this group wants to be interviewed. Maybe you just want this board, maybe you want some different municipal officials to be interviewed, maybe you want some of the staff on the fire department to be interviewed. So whoever you guys identify, that's who we'll do it with. We can do it one-on-one, we can do that through Zoom, we can do it through a combination of the both. Certainly no problem. So we literally just bring in all that information, get kind of information overload, take some time to delve through it, and then we start piecing things together. So what are some of the underlying issues? There's always issues, but it doesn't mean it's the worst issues in the world, right? Typically we find the same things almost at every department. Are the barriers? That could be geographical barriers. Maybe there's a river or a train station in the way. Or a bridge. Maybe it's some political barriers that are going on. We can help identify that and be that neutral entity to say, here's what some of the issues are. Maybe there's some groups or individuals that are very strong, that are good for the organization, or maybe they're very strong and not so good for the organization. But we can kind of tell you, here's what it is from the state perspective and national perspective on what you can do to overcome those barriers and be even better. And then obviously looking at what growth potential is there. So we're going to develop some models, some ideas. Sometimes, literally, it's us getting on the phone or meeting together. And sometimes car rides are the best things for us because nobody's bothering us, and we just start, what about this? What about that? And then we try to build up or shoot down on, no, that's not going to work because of blank. Okay? But we work on those short-term, intermediate, long-term goals. We look at what the options are for staffing for you, what those proposals can be. We look at any cooperative agreements or partnerships that you guys can work with. We also are going to develop some budgets for you so you can compare. Option 1, how much does that really cost us? Option 2 or option 3. And we'll include salaries, equipment, all those capital expenses. We're going to be talking with the key stakeholders that you guys identify, and we're going to talk with them about more specifically, what do you want done? How do you want this written out within the document? We're going to go through some pros and cons to see what would really be attainable for this group. And then we're going to start formalizing that recommendation, get that draft copy out and talk to the chief and saying, okay, based on what you know, what do we do? Is this good? Do we strengthen it? Do we keep going forward? We give that report to Chief Saul, present it to you guys after we finish up with that report. And these recommendations are on page page 10 and 11 are those specific things that we'll be going through, but we explain it in more detail on page 9 and 10. And this is the timeline, as you guys suggested. We're open to movement. If you guys want to do things a little faster, a little slower, that's okay. I will tell you, December is always the worst month to do anything. That doesn't mean we won't do it, just saying by the time you set up interviews and weather, hunting, and everything else, we're willing to, but it's just a difficult time. So we would do stuff before Thanksgiving, kind of do behind the scenes during that time break, and then after the beginning of the year, that's when we really get focused on the rest of the report and everything else in the timeline follows what was requested in the RFP. This is my information, which was in both presentation, and I think I gave everybody a business card. And lastly, we want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, for selecting us as one of the finalists. We're excited about the project, and we think that we have some good ideas that we can start generating as we talk with the group to present to you guys. So we'll open it up for questions.
Gary has a question.
Yes, sir.
And then Doug.
For the process, you say partnerships and cooperation agreements. There's a lot of small departments around here. Do you look into that? Whereas, you know, if we could team up with, say, Green Lake and we didn't need an extra ladder truck, or we could get some help with manpower, which seems to be our biggest problem right now.
So we initially started with you guys, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of circles. We start with the board, the chief, working with whoever you guys suggest talking to. And then as we start hearing, like somebody says, hey, maybe something could be worked out with Green Lake, then that would be the second circle where we can call up and say, hey, we're doing the study. Remembering that you guys would be the client, so we have to adhere to what you're looking
I
for.
realize you can't say what they would like.
Yeah, we don't
to do,
know.
but-
However, what we found is usually when we call up places and say we're doing a study and this is what they're looking at, always two reactions. They're either like on board 100%, like whatever they say, we're gonna partner with them because we're just in the same issues that you guys are having, or sometimes there's a little resistance. We're not doing anything they do.
Probably fire chiefs and all that.
Well,
No, they're not all that.
I think to go along with what you're saying, I think that was in the original proposal, was to look at
yes,
our surrounding agencies, not just one, but all
right,
of them.
all of them.
And kind of, you know, hey, we're doing a study and,
Mhm.
you know, can we learn about your department type thing?
Right.
To
And we-
help us exactly what Gary was talking about.
And we will do that. We just need to list the names of who that would be. We'll do that. Usually when we hit the resistance, we say to them, hey, look, they're paying for the study and they want to include you guys. So you're getting all this free information, and the working together is, we're not charging you for it. They're paying the bill and you're getting the free benefits from it. You know, whatever we entail, the implementation and so on. So usually after they hear that, they're a lot more receptive, but I will tell you, especially now, post-COVID, most entities are more willing to work together now than ever before. Why?
Manpower.
Manpower. Everybody's suffering right now. Everybody's suffering right now. They're all struggling at having, money to pay, having viable, even when you have some money to pay, because there's some career departments. How's full-time career department doing right now?
Maybe 32 applications for almost 10 positions, starting at $55,000 to $60,000 a year.
Yeah. And they can't keep them filled. You have any given day, how many?
At one point in time, we were hiring a third of the shift in mandatory overtime.
A third of any given shift was on overtime. And that's not unusual across the state.
Yeah, so I saw in here that you were going to be looking at our equipment and stuff.
Mhm.
So we're looking at replacing an engine or two.
Mhm.
Is this something that you're going to look at to see, do we need two engines?
Mhm.
Do we need just one?
Mhm.
So is
We
that,
need any.
Yes.
well, I think that's a given. Will eventually wear out. So I'm curious about how you're going to go about doing that.
Right, so when we're here doing some of the interviews, we would ask for some time to go through and just walk through, take a look at each of the rigs. Obviously, we're going to get additional information from the chief on the ages and maybe the hours on the equipment. So we'll compare that to national standards to say, for an engine, the typical useful life of an engine is so many years. And for a brush truck, it's so many years. For a tender, it's so many years. And then we'll compare that to say,
But then,
what?
when you're interviewing other departments too, and using Mavis or mutual aid,
Mhm.
you don't have to buy all that equipment, because that, you're doing an inventory of other
But
departments.
they have to answer the call, and if they don't have the manpower, what do we do?
But that's what they're here to.
Right, and that's what I
That's what
hope
we
that
would
we can figure that out, because there are other departments in this area. How can we depend on them to answer our Mavis call, because we usually give it and we don't take it that often.
And that's what my prediction was. I was gonna say, you guys are probably going out more on responses to
Oh,
Mavis
it's
calls
been like that
instead
for
of the
years,
other way.
for years.
Yeah. And that's something that the group has to decide, because that's a cost factor. It's costing you money that you're not getting as recruitment. But those are some of the things that we can talk about to say, and educate the other entities. Hey, you're getting so many Mavis calls a year that it's your responsibility in the other, in your other district. You're not doing it, so you're getting free help. There should be a cost to that, and we can work and say, well, here's what the state average is for either agreements or mutual aid requests or sharing of equipment. There's a lot of places doing that now. You don't need a ladder truck in every department now. It's great to have, and people want it, but now you can strategically place them either in the district or the county or wherever to say, based on the fires and the ones that need an aerial apparatus, where do we place them? And then you have the other departments that might say, you know what, we're not going to buy a new aerial, but we will contribute some funds to the 2 or 3 strategically placed areas in the county.
I just wanted to say one thing, though. You said that, there's a cost to the Mavis call. You cannot charge for Mavis calls.
Right. There's
You
a
cannot
cost to the
charge for
person,
mutual aid.
right, there's a cost to the person that's providing that service.
Correct, but if you're part of Mavis,
Right.
Mavis is not something you can charge for. We
Right.
can't charge Green Lake to go there, give help, they can't charge us to come here,
Right.
or any department.
Right, we all understand
Okay,
that.
I
It's
just wanna
that
make sure.
from
Yep.
Our budget point of view, it's costing us money
Send it
money's
right out.
going out on someone else's call, and.
But that's why it's mutual aid box alarm system, because they're doing the same thing for us. We just gotta, I just wanted to make.
But we
that
just
clear.
do it more often for everybody else.
That's,
And that's
Wow.
a significant issue, I
okay,
think.
we'll talk about that.
Right. That's outside this right now.
Yeah.
So we would compare the national averages to the ages of your vehicles that you're looking at, conditions of the vehicles, again, talking with the chief to find out, has this had a lot of repairs, has it cost more money for its use than what you need? Would it be beneficial to have a newer rig or to replace a totally, or it's an acceptable rig? Certain things are NFPA requirements, so in my brain, you have to have at least 2 engines. I mean, you gotta have 2 engines. You gotta have your main pumper on scene, and you have to have a secondary. From a standardization point of view, right? You could argue some places like, well, only have 1 engine. My discussion is, but from that point, you need your main pumper. If that fails, you gotta have your secondary rig on scene. So that's kind of the viewpoint we go from. If we quote or suggest certain things, we would try to bring in, here's the standard that we're talking about. This is why it says that. Obviously, you as a board would have to decide, do we want to adhere to that standard, or is that something we are not necessarily going to do? But from our perspective, whatever we would recommend would be from either a state or national guideline or standard.
Any other questions? Jolene?
Well,
Yep.
since this is your last chance to sort
Yeah.
of, make your pitch to us. You said that you did work with Ripon EMS. And I remember that, serving on Ripon City Council, I remember.
Yes.
Working with the organization.
Yeah.
So is there anything more you want to say about you seeing that as being a value because you seem to know perhaps more about the Ripon area? What are some perhaps maybe not so good things or concerns because, you do know that. Can you come in unbiased here? Those types of things. Can you talk more specifically about that?
Okay.
And maybe does that mean then some of your research, you have more time for other things since you already spent time researching this
Right.
area?
So we do have a bunch of stuff on Ripon EMS anyways. We understand what some of their strengths and opportunities for growth are as well. We can certainly use that additional information as we're looking at this. Now, I got to be very careful to set the two aside. I understand Ripon EMS is totally separate than the Ripon Fire Department, right? And remember one of those boundaries or things where I said sometimes the political personality, those exist. So we have to accept that, and we have to recognize they're 2 different entities, and they're organized differently. They have different sets of rules and regulations that govern them. So we need to accept that, and that can be part of the educational process to say, here's the differences. The question that comes up then, despite the differences, is there an opportunity to potentially work together? So Ripon EMS is short-staffed too, right? So is it possible to come up with a program where you can have Ripon EMS and the Ripon Area Fire District working together, staffing vehicles, going on calls? Certainly they already go on car accidents, right? You go on a car accident, you have the engine there, rescue truck, and the ambulance. They're already there. On structure fires, the ambulance may be going in as a support unit just for being there to help with the fire department. So we got to get through some of the political stuff, but we would address that to say this is a political issue, some things, and here's potentially how you can get through that. There are some people on the ambulance service that would love to be firefighters. They would love it. They would love to be that dual role. There are some people in the ambulance that would never want to do that. In a million years, they're like, no, I can't do that. Same on the fire side, right? There are some firefighters that would be like, yeah, I'm already in EMR. I could already do that. I could help them out. I could drive. I'll be glad to do that. And there are other firefighters who are like, I'll leave before I have to do anything with patient care. So you build a stepping stone plan, right? You say, okay, if you start working together, those people that want to be cross-staffed or dual role on both, you let them start working together and you build it. First year you do this, second year you do that. And then as you start working together, you say, as we're recruiting, do you recruit for people who are both fire and EMS, or offer the opportunities of, if you come work here or volunteer here, we will help by paying for some classes, both fire and EMS, working together. So we can come, we've heard all the arguments. I'll tell you, it gets heated pretty quick when you start putting fire and EMS together if they've been separate. But we have some plans that can be considered if you want to.
We're down to like 3 minutes, so.
My last question, real quick, if you'd like to answer, is you mentioned that the end result is that we get a report to our chief. Our information we get from you is only as good as we understand it and can do something with it. Unless anyone has a pressing issue, please use that, but I'd like to know more about once we get that, what do you do then to work with us, to then meet with us, to really understand what we can do with it?
Sure.
Unless there's other more pressing.
Short answer and long answer, we get the final report to the chief because that's what the RFP said, but then we also put in there that we would then come back one more time to meet with the entire board and spend some time talking to you about it. So obviously we're on a time crunch tonight, but if you said we're going to set aside 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever to sit down and go through all the components.
When you're done.
Yeah, next April, right? May, next April, May. We would, whatever time you want. You want an 8-hour day, we'll fill it up. If you only want 2 hours, we'd go through all that, working with you on that. We can then, that would be the end of the contract, but I will tell you, we opened it up where we can work with implementation too. We can work with the chief to say, here's this, this, and this, and then each month get back, kind of like what Dan did with Ripon EMS. He came personally down and worked to get, you weren't there for that?
No, I'm new.
Correct. But he worked with the Ripon EMS individuals and service director to say, here's doing this and this, and worked with them, once a day for, I forget.
Was that separate from the contract, or you're saying that you could do that for us if that is what we choose as part of our current contract?
I think that was part of, I believe.
Yeah.
I had to look at it.
I forget how we bid it out.
It doesn't matter about that. My
Yep.
question is for you,
Yep,
that
we
process
would
you
do
just said, if it felt like checking in a month or 2 months, is that part of the current contract?
We could write it that way. We don't
Okay.
have a
We're
contract with them right now.
No, but I mean, if we were to go.
Yeah,
We would absolutely be
We can
willing to
amend
do
it
that.
to do
yeah.
Right, and we would be absolutely willing to do
Okay.
that. Absolutely.
We have just 1 minute. I want to see if Barry, Mike, or Jonathan have any questions. Okay. Okay, you've got like 40 seconds to give us your final
All right.
answer.
Thanks for having us here tonight. We think that we're the best company for you guys. We're used to dealing with departments of this size. We only listed 4 entities in the references. We'll certainly give you some more, but Hartford Fire, Beaver Dam Fire, Ripon Fire, we've worked with in the past, and we've had very good results, with them. We still get calls from them even after the fact. Like, we know this isn't part of the contract, we're done, but we got a question for you. So we never don't answer the phone, right? We may call you back if we're busy. But we've worked with entities of the size. We have some already creative solutions that have worked in the past. Understanding that you may bring up some more unique perspectives that we're not aware of yet, but we can take all that past experience and apply it to what you do to us. And we're fairly comfortable and confident that we're going to be able to find some solutions to keep your service high, which is what you guys want.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
What's that?
I was asking the IT gentleman if you could
Oh, yeah.
get the thumb
Let me
drive.
know over there for you.
Safe travels back to Iowa.
Thank you. I live in the Dells, Wisconsin Dells, so I got the long drive. Yeah, he's got the longer drive.
Kind of a dark night with the rain.
Yeah.
Lots of deer out there, they're moving around.
Are there?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No more turkeys.
Did it get bomb?
I didn't hear.
What happened? Did somebody catch it?
Go on Facebook if you can see it.
Some damn fire truck ran it over, didn't they?
No doubt. It's that ladder truck that we kept talking about.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Right,
Take care.
thank you.
I'll bring the next one in right away.
Oh, man, that was so
Okay.
fun.
Well, somebody started a new page about the turkey.
Yeah, I found it. I could look.
I'm surprised it didn't get hit by a car a lot sooner, if it did get hit by a car.
It's incredible. I mean, I heard they were bringing the DNR and everything.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what happened.
Okay. They're relocating him to somebody's Thanksgiving table.
Johnny the Ripon Turkey. Run, Johnny, run.
And those first two chairs up there.
Green cardigan.
If you have anything
Yeah,
for
let me grab it
PowerPoint,
here.
he can help you out.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know, it's not saying anything. There's one where there's a police officer with a big net.
So
That was like yesterday.
Yeah.
they caught it in that.
Did they catch it and catch it in
And
the
they
net?
tried, yeah, it was a funny story, and you gotta watch the video, but there's a video on there. I think it's the next one down. But it's funny, and then all the comments underneath are very funny. Like
486.
Like the turkey now has a warrant out for his arrest for, resisting arrest.
I saw the one where they almost got him in and then he booked
He
it.
took off, yeah.
So I didn't see the next
Okay.
one.
Yeah, my grandchildren.
I saw him one day, I just had to stop coming down the hill.
All right, turkey done.
So we're gonna give, I'll time 15 minutes for
Okay.
presentation and 15 minutes for questions. We
Sounds
had
good.
a turkey that was kind of loose on the loose, that's what we.
Yeah.
In the building?
No, around this area of the city.
Oh, okay, all right.
He got his fan base going.
Okay. So welcome.
Hi, welcome. So I'm Robert Whitaker. I'm with McMahon and Associates. I'll do a little introduction as we go through the presentation, but the proposal we submitted was in response to your RFP for organizational analysis and development of a strategic plan. So a little bit about us. McMahon traditionally has been known as an engineer and architecture firm. They, in the last 10 years, have expanded their services. They do, as an engineer and architecture firm, do a lot of work, municipal work, in the Fox Valley area and the eastern side of Wisconsin. About 10 years ago, they decided to expand some offerings because they had a lot of municipal clients looking to have consulting work done on other things other than just architecture and engineering. So they got into municipal management and financing of municipal projects as another arm of the business. So about 4 years ago, the company that McMahon acquired, a company called RW Management, that was a public safety and municipal management consulting firm that had been in Wisconsin and actually done national work. So now I was with that company. Now we're part of McMahon, and we've been with McMahon for about, I think, 4 years now. About 500 clients, 300 are public safety. We have 4 different groups that the company has under this municipal management sector. One is public safety and emergency management. One is public management, so we work with municipal management, interim city administrator, manager type of work or consulting work for those groups. Security services and then building inspections. So we do building inspections for municipalities that maybe don't employ their own building inspector and they do it under a contract. So when it comes to the public safety and emergency management, that's the area that this project is under. We have a number of consultants that work in that group. One of the things that we value, what we bring to the table is we bring a balanced opinion, and we also value that we look at success as our recommendations being implemented. It's easy to take a report, give it to you, and I walk away and I've seen a lot of reports in organizations I've even worked in, you hire a consultant and it goes and sits on a shelf. The value that I see and that organization sees is let's follow up and see how we can get those implemented so they're reasonable suggestions and plans. They're not something that's just out of the reality of normal. We also do in organizations that maybe have a chief that turns over, the chief leaves for another department, and they want to go through a hiring process. We do executive recruitment, interim management, things like that also. So as I said, one of our success, we value success on the recommendations being implemented and contact with the client. Our team that would work on this project, I'll just go through them real quick so you have a general idea of the background of everyone. That's me. I've been with McMahon and RW prior to that for 10 years. RW is not my company, even though that's my initials. It has nothing to do with it. I just ended up working for them at one point, and it just so happened that that was the company's name also. My full-time job, I'm a fire and EMS chief in a 7 community fire department just outside of Milwaukee. We're an accredited organization. One of the values of accreditation is to develop and manage through a strategic plan. and the process that you manage through strategic planning is use your strategic plan. You build it with community input, develop a strategic plan, and then base your annual goals and budget off of your strategic plan and build that into your annual budget. And that's one of the big values and sort of something that, in my mind, as I look through 10 years ago, why did I want to bring an accredited organization or an accreditation in? Because it costs some significant money to get up and running. Was the process that that organization, the accrediting body values. And that's why we brought that forward. I have a master's degree in emergency management from Oklahoma State University. We've done consulting, interim management, strategic planning, organizational analysis. We have right now about 5 or 6 projects just in the public safety side going throughout the state in a lot of similar communities to Ripon, communities that are having growth. They're having challenges recruiting people to work and be paid on call, paid on premise, part-time, looking at how they can afford, oh boy, are we gonna have to hire full-time people, and how does that all work? And then pushed up against this, especially in Wisconsin, we do some projects in other states, but in Wisconsin, levy limits, expenditure restraint, all that type of thing. So Kevin Bierce is gonna work on the project with me. Kevin's the fire chief in Pewaukee. There are 2 community fire departments, the city and village of Pewaukee. Kevin is also, they're an accredited department, and he also does a lot of work on the commercial building inspector side for our team. One of the other projects, or things I mentioned before, is a value that I see even as someone who sits in a professional role as a fire and EMS chief, is we bring another angle to the table. So we bring municipal management, because a lot of times it's easy for people who are in our line of work to look at it and say, boy, we really need this, we really need that. And sometimes you get caught in that, hey, that's sort of what I need. And not that we're wrong, but I always like to have my recommendations looked at from someone that, if I had to go talk to a city administrator, a city manager, or a town administrator manager and say, here's what I'm thinking, what do you think? And so Ed is our guy that does that. Ed has been in municipal management for decades. He was president of Wisconsin City Managers, WCMA. He's done a ton of work on that side. So Ed's sort of the guy we look to and say, hey, what do you think of this? Dan Burns has a significant background in EMS. He was past executive director of Flight for Life, has worked with us on our EMS side now for several years too. And then Kevin Clone is the fire chief in Neenah Menasha. He'll be the 5th consultant on this project. Kevin has experience not only in Neenah Menasha, but prior he was the chief in a suburb of Appleton that was a volunteer, paid on call type of model fire department. So he's got some significant experience on both career and the paid on call, paid on premise side. Our boss is Jeff Romer. He would be the oversight of the project. I'd be the project manager. Jeff would be my boss. He has been doing this for a long time. He's fire chief in Green Bay. He is public safety, so he's got law enforcement background also. Emergency management director, and he was the owner of RW before it was sold to McMahon. So what makes us different? We have a lot of broad clients in Native American tribes, cities, villages, towns. We're based in Wisconsin. A lot of knowledge on professional services, industry standards and regulations. As I said before, we'd like to see our plans implemented. It's not just come up with a document, here you go, and we leave town and you never hear from us again. I think if you talk to our clients, you'll hear the value of what they get from our process, and they enjoy what we bring back. From a project timeline standpoint, we'd have a kickoff meeting with a project team. We would involve people from the department or the board, however the department and the board sees fit. Regular communication between the project team and the consultants that are working on the project. We have a documentation request, so we'll want to see documentation of what you have in place now, policies, operational plans, things like that. Walk through your facilities, look at your equipment, talk to your members, from command staff to the firefighters, lieutenants, captains, whatever ranks you have. Do some interviews, see what their feedback is. Talk to community engagement, or have a community engagement session There's a couple different ways we could do that. We would want to talk to you about how you think it would be best and the chief to engage the community, because each community is different. How do you talk to the community? In some communities, I'm going to get the answer of, well, do an online survey. Other communities are going to say, no, let's have them come in the station and do a face-to-face type of informational session. And then come up with the recommendations, bring those back to the project team, review those with the project team, and then make the final plan and presentation that we would give to this group. We estimate about, from start to finish, about a 5-month period to get all that done and turn that around. So in the end, you would have an organizational analysis of the department that would be based on professional standards. It doesn't necessarily, when you have professional standards, there are laws and regulations that the state of Wisconsin require, and then there are standards that are professional industry best practices. So there's two different things that we'd really want to look at there. You have to make a differentiation at times, but that would be based on best practices and laws and regulations. And then you'd have your 5-year strategic plan, which I think was one of the main goals of your RFP to have at the end as a plan result. So with that, comments or questions?
Wow,
I
fast.
timed it right?
No, you've got 5 minutes, but we can do questions. Anybody have questions?
You do know we're not tied up with the EMS, not that it.
Yep, separate. So it would be, we can look at it, but I understand it's two separate organizations.
Not that they couldn't
You have
be looked
talked
at,
about working
we could
together.
work together.
Yeah, I've sort of I've followed some of that that you've been working on with trying to share staff and parts, to try to cover for shortages at times. But we're well aware of that.
One question that Gary had before was looking at, that was part of the proposal, was looking at the surrounding agencies and saying, hey, let us learn about your agency, because we're doing this study.
Right.
How does that work with you guys?
So I would say it's what you as the team want us to do. Some communities will say, no, we want to look at our organization and that's it. Other communities will say, hey, go talk to our neighbors and let's see what's out there, so to speak. Whether that means cooperation, working together, and that could be all the way from just training together to, hey, could we do something different? Can we make this look different to provide a better service?
More sharing of resources.
Right, yeah. And so I would leave that to you as our project team, I guess I'm saying, because if that's not within the scope, or it's not what you want us to look at, I don't want to force that on somebody.
Sure,
Yeah.
it's just, money savings,
Yep.
obviously, and,
Yeah.
operational ability and stuff like that.
I think you, from what I have followed up and researched, you're in a situation not unlike many other communities across the country, and that does bring, especially in places where communities you're sort of at that point, well, do we need some people here, and do we not need people here? Your surrounding towns probably are going, boy, we can't find volunteers anymore. How are we going to get these people? And maybe there is some synergy to look at that and say, hey, how do we work this together cooperatively?
Or even equipment.
Right, equipment, sharing equipment. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can go. It's just dependent on what the leadership and one of the things that I guess in my say chief side is I could, and I'm sure Chief Saul could, you'd say, hey, I want a fire department that can have a 4-minute response time. We probably will come up with a very similar plan in a community that has 9,000 people, and we can probably, shake that up, or you say, oh, we're good with 10, 15-minute response time. You can develop a department like that. That's the professional side of our work. The community has to decide what service do we want and what do we want to invest. And at times, the community may say to people in the professional side, say, what do you think about this? And what would you recommend? And that's definitely a fair question to ask. But especially in today's world where, unfortunately, if you want any sort of significant amount of money, you're probably going to referendum. So you have to have you have to have a product that sells, so to speak, because it's not something that you can just turn around and say, yeah, we're gonna increase the levy by $500,000 or $1 million. You're probably going to referendum, and that is people marking the little dotted line on a ballot. And so you have to have something that people say, no, I have a value there, this is what I want for the service in my community.
With the implementation of Act 10, most governmental or quasi-governmental entities can't be sustained. And that's one of the reasons a 5-year strategic plan is
Yeah.
so needed, because we're headed for a cliff.
Yeah, in communities, I think, especially probably your situation here is you probably were able to rely on paid-on-call volunteer type of operation for the most part and keep it going with 2-3% increases annually. And you had people that were willing to do it. And now in the last 5 to 6 years, it's been like, where'd those people go? And what happened? And that is not able to be sustained on just a normal levy limit increase of 2 or 3, whatever your growth is in your community.
And it's not even that good,
Yeah, it's more like, you know, you're gonna have to get
1%.
10-15% increase if you wanted to pay to jump from that, hey, we were paid on call volunteer to a bigger expense. So somewhere in the middle is what sells and what doesn't sell.
I guess I have a question then,
Yeah.
right? Would you be looking at the revenue too, and how we might fund this, what we need?
Yeah, we could definitely look at that and your model that you use to fund the organization, and then what would be needed to, say, bring in the revenue to fund potentially what that goal would be. And there's, you know, in municipal government, there's probably a very limited number of options, but
It's not even that.
yeah, we can look at that and say, how would that be done? And there's some different people talking about, in Wisconsin now, the fire service fee, which is generally was meant for towns, but there's a lot of movement as communities have struggled now in cities and villages to say, how are we gonna fund our stuff?
Thank you for bringing that up,
Yeah,
because I know it exists, and I'm trying to get anybody interested in looking at that, and so I hope you look at that too.
yeah. The cities, League of Municipalities in Wisconsin is very interested in that right now.
So, in the referendums I've been involved in, not saying we're going to referendum, but you will always get the community involvement, and it's very heavy involvement. Is that something that, even for this part of it, to get the community involvement, because I think that's important, and to get them to understand throughout the strategic plan process.
Yeah.
And you're consulting to make it known how important it is and to get their input.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points or pillars of a strategic plan for fire department, and law enforcement, I guess, would say somewhat similar, but the community has to weigh in on what they're looking for, because there's a value, right? You're gonna go buy a car, and you put a value to that car. What am I gonna pay for this service? And normally, the quick answer you get, if I ask most people, how do you value your fire department or your EMS department? How fast do they get there? But for me or you to explain that to a resident that, this is how to value it other than time is very hard. Because you call 911, you want someone to show up. Now, one person can show up, and they might not do a whole lot of good because you have one person by themselves. And then how to explain that to somebody and say, yeah, that one person showed up, but the state says you have to have 5 people to go and start an interior fire attack. And they had to sit outside and wait for those 5 people, and it took 24 minutes for those 5 people to get there. And start to talk about that, it gets a little tough, but back to the chief's question is, I think that's important, because now you go back and say, here's why we need X, if that's what is decided out of that plan. You're gonna need supporters in the community that say, yeah, I agree, because neighbors talk to neighbors, and people talk at the pizza place, and that happens.
Yeah, I I think we were to do that community engagement, we would need to talk to our neighbors, surrounding departments too, because if we're willing to accept a 5 or 8 minute department, we would probably be needing to rely on other departments in the area. But what's their staffing like?
Well, and that's what a study will help us.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something that we would want to know about.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, so just a follow-up more specifically regarding client input, because that's what we're asking about. Too, it sounds like getting community input and client. It says in your proposal that there'd be regular meetings with the fire administration and associated agencies. Do you want to say anything more about that? Would it include interviews with folks
Yep.
in the department around here? And then, so anything more about the process that you want to know that would help you stand out?
Yeah.
And then as well as the end result, you had started, I like that you said, it's not just about a piece of a report that's going to sit on a shelf. You want to see things implemented. So in these last minutes that we have, can you speak anything more about what that means for implementation and perhaps more importantly, that follow-up?
Yep. So normally what we would do if a community in this project like this said, hey, we want you to talk to our neighbors, we would engage the chief and say, who should we talk to? Who's the chief here? Who's the chief there? And try to set up times and say, hey, we're working with this community, this department, and there's interest in potentially shared services. What do you think of that? How do you see, what challenges do you have? And how could maybe we even bring some ideas together as a third party to say, hey, did you ever think of this? Did you ever think of that? Is this an idea you'd be interested in? And I think that one of the things that when we do these, the most information I get, I can read policies and procedures and look at all your documents, but you gotta talk to the people. And you start talking to the chief and the deputy chief, and then you talk to the lieutenants and the firefighters, and you go to the neighboring department, and you talk to that chief, and you start putting those pieces together, and you start seeing, hey, I'm looking at this from an outside view, I haven't looked at this before, and here's what I'm seeing, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this, and let's come up with some, is this feasible, and then can we work through that, and then present those ideas back to the project team and say, hey, here's what I'm hearing here, here's what I'm hearing there. And I think like I said before, the most information you get is when you do the interviews and you sit down with the firefighters and the responders and say, hey, what's this or what's that? And what do you think of this? And you get, firefighters generally are pretty good at giving you their feedback, and they're not gonna sugarcoat it. So you're gonna quickly figure out what's going on. And then on the back end is creating the recommendations or things in the plan that the community would buy into that are achievable, and say, how could you do this, and what are the 5 steps to actually get there, and what's that 5-year plan look like? If the 5-year plan was, hey, we need to have some people during the day to support our response, how could we get there? And then what's the financial impact? How does it look like? And what are some options the community has too?
So specifically, when you give us that report, does that mean you're going to help us understand that report? Does that mean, what does that look like?
So normally what we do is, I would come back and do a presentation on that report to you. You'd have the document, you'd have the report, and we're there. I can't say open checkbook to say come back and help with every step of the way, but one of the things that I value working for this company is I have the openness that if a client calls 6 months later and says, hey, we have your report and we're sort of working on this, what do you think? And what do you recommend we do? That there's not an hourly chart. It's not something we call and say, oh, that's a tick mark here, I'm going to send you a bill for an hour at a time. The value is to build the relationship with the client, as with a lot of businesses, but have that where the chief can call and say either to me or Jeff, my boss, hey, I got this going on, what do you think of that? Or can you come and talk to our board for an hour next month about X? And they're creating that relationship is important just with any business. It's probably all you see that in your personal and professional lives, but that is something that I value even as a person who does this work to say, oh, I want to see them succeed. I want to look in the newspaper a year later and read an article, that on my thing I get every day from the Fire Chiefs Association that says, hey, look, Ripon Ripon's working on this, or they got this done and accomplished, and that's something that I got.
In the interview process, is there ever any interviewers from the general public in the communities, or is it just basically the professional side of it?
So for this project, we would do both. We would do firefighters, and we'd probably ask the chief and his staff, what's the best way to get some input, whether that's do a training night and we sit in the corner conference room and take a couple people in at a time and we spend that time doing it, or
Town hall meeting.
yeah.
Could do a town hall meeting.
Sometimes you just say to all of them, hey, come on, whatever night you have something, and that night's gonna be, we're gonna talk about goals and objectives of the department. We've done it a couple different ways. The officers, you might be your lieutenants, we do them, because they have sometimes the middle, I'll call them sort of middle management people, they have a different view of things than the firefighters or the chiefs, and so you get some information on that. And do that, but then the public, engaging them, it's a little more challenging because people have busy lives and say, hey, come to the firehouse on Monday night and we're gonna talk about the fire department. That's a tough pull right now
Food,
to get,
food.
but yeah, I did one in, I think it was Mugwanago, and they had food and they got a fair number of people to come, more than I thought would come. And you do get the people, just like if you're on any town or elected board, you get the passionate people for the most part, but they're passionate. And you balance that.
Okey dokey. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. We
What-
don't have on the agenda, we don't take action tonight.
Okay.
So I think we'll do that next week.
Next week at your meeting, is the intent, just so I have an idea, is the intent to wait till after the first year and do this as part of your 2023 budget, or is this something that's a
We'll have to
process?
decide when we want to start.
Okay, so it's open, it's not,
It could be very soon,
okay.
Yeah,
before the year's out, or
Okay.
it could be early next year. We have to make that
it'd
decision.
be December or January.
Okay, all right, well, I appreciate the feedback, I'll probably get asked that question when
Thank you very much.
Watch out for the deer on the way home.
Only
Yeah.
on Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving, Christmas Day.
Yeah, I think probably we're all used to working all odd hours of the day, but yeah, no, it was, rain was crazy on the way up here.
Was it? Are you coming from?
Milwaukee area.
Oh, Milwaukee.
Yeah, it was,
It'll be dark too.
yeah,
Yeah, watch out for the deer.
oh yeah, take my time.
Yeah, somebody already caught the turkey, going up way back.
Yeah, your turkey's not running around, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good
very
night.
much.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving right along. Mark, there's two different things in there, so don't let her, when she opens it, pull one out and then have something come flipping out.
Okay.
It's his wife, it's his wife's birthday present, I'm a little late,
Oh, wow.
for me, yeah, not from him.
We've known each other probably almost
Chris
as
and
long,
I-
but
oh, yeah.
Chris has known her forever.
Chris and I worked together at Ripon College in the 90s. 30 years, 32 years. How long has she been
There's
here?
no babies.
It's been 37 years, yeah.
What?
There's no babies if you went to college in the 90s.
I graduated in 2000. I look real young on paper, till people see me and then they're like, do you need a ride home tonight?
No, I drove.
Oh, you drove?
Yeah,
How'd that go?
it was okay. Kind of interesting. I have to kind of like sit sideways in the seat to be able to fit in.
I suppose that's
Are
something
those
you should say
cup
on
holders?
camera.
They are.
Cool.
I've never used this one, but I asked that same question and they gave it to me. So,
I should get one just for, heck of it, for a couple.
Didn't you have to wear that thing for 6 months?
I have to wear it for 8 weeks, 24 hours a day. And then from there it trails off, and then at 6 months it's gone. So somewhere in there.
So contact football's out.
Yes.
You don't turn over in bed.
Thank you, John.
But on the technically,
You can
Okay.
come up here. So, this is Leslie from Pierce. So, as you guys had directed Deputy and I to do, and start trying to spec out a fire engine. The spec usually, again, takes about 3 months, and we did this in actually probably 2 weeks. I'm gonna say a couple things, I'm gonna turn it over to Leslie, and then we'll kind of tag team it. So, basically this fire engine that,
Could you just wait a minute, Mike, and step out a second?
oh, Mike. Got it.
Thanks, Barry.
I didn't even see mine.
No one sees my.
It does.
I'm like, Mike didn't step out, he's right there.
It's Riley.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question, even if Mike isn't here, because I don't want to talk anyway, but. So Pierce builds these trucks. And we have these ideas that Pierce is one of the better fire truck builders. Okay. When you build one of these trucks, we've got an old truck here. How many miles does 11 have on it? I bet it doesn't have 20,000,
It does. It's got, I think last I looked, 29,000.
Looks like
So it's got
a
$29,000 hours on it. So the pump goes down. Why can't we just get a pump to put in?
Well,
I mean, this is a honest to God question. I have an old pickup. You know, when the engine goes to heck, I'd probably dump it. But you know, if the box falls off, I'm probably gonna put something else on the car.
well, and on a truck, I think it does depend what it is that goes to hell. If it's the pump, that's a pretty expensive part of the truck.
I know, but so is the engine and the transmission and the rear end.
Right.
And the body work.
We're comparing apples to oranges, like, I get what you're saying.
There's fire
but-
standards that we have to
Yeah.
meet, that we
Yeah.
can't replace just a piece on it and it meets the standards.
Well, where did that come from? NFPA? The
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
old, worn out fire chiefs that got anything to do with make dumbass. Excuse me.
All right, so we're gonna get started.
You know those
So what's your
guys?
opinion here?
I said before we started.
Thanks, now she's running away.
Okay. I know where to start.
So anyway, this is Leslie from Pierce. You guys asked us to go out and spec out an engine, so that's what we did. This engine, I'm gonna say a couple things, and I'll go over a couple things, and I'm gonna turn it over to Leslie. We can tag team it from there. This engine that we spec'd out was done in, again, 2 weeks. This is very similar to what we're looking at. This engine, what you have to remember is, because we're on time frame for price increases and everything else, we gave her everything that we needed on the engine. So this has all our needs, right? But do we need all our needs? We haven't had time to do that type of research. And what I mean by that is an electric deck gun, for example, okay? We use our deck gun a lot. We run with limited staffing, so that's something we feel is a need for us. There's a couple agencies that have those, and we want to go out to those agencies, those surrounding fire departments, and see it work, and get their feedback, and then make a decision. So maybe that's a need we have right now, but that may not be a need that we come to a conclusion to say, this is really not a need for us. So we can cut that out. It has all our needs, okay, that we need, and that price that you're gonna hear is a worst case scenario price. And she's gonna talk about all pricing. I'm not doing that, okay? She can give you a more broad overlook of pricing than I can. So just go into this knowing that this engine has all our needs, and those needs, we need to research those needs a little further. And we're gonna do that within the next 2 weeks, okay? So, go ahead.
So you're telling me this is the top most price we're gonna pay for this truck, it could be cheaper.
Correct.
The price that she's gonna give you
or for this truck,
Is-
you decide you don't need that. or-
Correct,
Or
Correct.
we can't afford that, that's,
correct.
gotcha.
You know, if we have to cut things out, it's gonna cut our needs. I'm gonna tell you, I'm just gonna use an example. This bell right here, I want the bell on the front of the fire truck, because it's tradition, it's what I like, but it's not a need. We're not getting a bell, I even told her that at the plant tonight, I said, I want the bell.
This actually, this drawing has more things in it than you guys even asked me for.
Correct.
I wanted a light tower, but
And, you know, and actually, a couple guys wanted a light tower. One of those on top of the fire engine, there's a big light that goes up like this, and it turns, and it lights up everything. Brandon's got one, right? But you have to have a generator to do that. Well, these days, a generator, you don't put generators on fire engines, for the
Not-
most part.
for- just
right?
rescues
It's one
typically,
thing,
yeah.
yeah, rescue squads, heavy rescue squads, get generator. But engines these days don't. Everything's battery operated. So a generator, for us to buy a generator and put a light tower on, we want light. We want to light it up like a football field. But do we need that? Or can we do with battery operated tripod lights and the standard lights that come on here, seam lights? So little things like that, you know, we want it, but we cut out that want. These are needs. So I'm gonna turn it over to you and we can tag team it from there.
Okay.
And, you know, yeah, if you pass that out, don't pay attention to the colors or anything like that.
Oh, no, I
Okay, 'cause-
brought some drawings. So this is a very weird year in the fire industry in general. So I just was running some numbers because the chief is right. We just didn't have a lot of time to do this. If they want to get a truck in before November 1st, which is another price increase this year, we had to kind of move quickly. And I've been doing that with a lot of departments, but there are departments that have bought more recently, so I had things to kind of duplicate, or at least I knew where it was starting. So when the chief called me, you know, last 3 weeks ago and said, can we do this by November 1st? And I'm like, sure, if we can like meet tomorrow, like we really have to start. And so this and the specs that I put together and the neighboring departments that I've given them lists of options to go see, it's based on other trucks I've sold in the area, what works for rural departments, what works for city departments. I happen to have a lot of comparisons of city truck prices because I tend to sell more trucks in a row to a city, like Appleton or Oshkosh or even in Menasha, I sell on a pretty regular basis. So I can compare pricing from the last 2 years and just how quickly these prices have gone up. So what I did, this is Grand Chute's truck, and this is, you know, we had the committee at the factory, we looked at all the different cabs, we looked for space inside the cab, for mounting tools, for carrying firefighters, for EMS bags that they want to be able to carry in the cab, that kind of stuff. So, you know, we kind of settled on a cab, and we settled on a body, knowing that they need more water as a rural department, but want to have a lower hose bed and still have compartment space. So we kind of, you know, I took all those pieces and kind of went with this configuration, which is a truck that I sold to Grand Chute, and I have another one on order for Grand Chute right now, actually, that's pretty much identical to this. And that's kind of the model we use. But we looked at, and this is the Quantum that you guys have, and we just were kind of looking at, with the amount of water that was on this truck and the lack of compartment space, you know, what are we missing? What do you not like? What do you want to? And to your point, these are 30-year trucks. You know, people are buying these, and even my most aggressive replacement scheduled departments are not replacing more than 15 years. So, you know, yes, it's a big dollar item. Yes, they don't get a lot of miles in all the areas, but they get use. They get pump hours. Things fall apart. And yes, NFPA standards do come into to account, and maybe it is old fire chiefs, I have no idea, but there are a lot of safety things that have come out in the last 30 years. Some things I think are really ridiculous. I don't really think that firefighters need to be shown on the top of a truck with little lighted squares where they're, what's a stepping surface? I think they're smart enough to know that. But there are other things that I think are very much important, like the chevron on the back of a truck that you can see from 2 miles away. As somebody who spends a lot of time in my car at night, I think that is a good one. So for what it's worth, you know, they're big dollar trucks. They do tend to retain their value, but after 30 years, not really. There's not a lot of people who want to buy a 30-year-old truck. When the chief first called me, he asked me specifically about stock units, about demo units. We have not had any stock units on the ground for close to a year. I mean, we had one that's going to be at our sales meeting. It's kind of a newer product, and it was on our stock list for 1 day. I sold it actually, but by the time I got back to the office and turned in a purchase order, somebody else had sold it before me. So I had a shot at one stock unit this year. So everything that the department has asked for is basically, I didn't print out the 180 pages of specs, but it's, you know, 13 pages of options. It's line by line. We talked very specifically about engines, transmissions, water tanks, hose bed height, lighting packages, and like the chief mentioned, you know, there are some items on here that, you know, could we cut them, like to get some price out of the truck? Yes, the remote deck gun, I gave them a list of 3 people just in Fond du Lac County. I'm like, go look at these trucks, go see what they say about them. There's a lot of these trucks right around here. They just have not had that time. So worst case scenario, with everything that we put in while we were at the plant and on a follow-up meeting, the price of this truck would be about $885,000. That's everything in. And I understand that that is a completely shocking number.
Not really.
Okay, well, good.
What would be the down payment on a truck?
There's no down payment required. So our standard terms are no payment is required until delivery of that truck. And our lead time right now is 32 to 36 months. So I kind of went back and looked at some pricing starting in January of 2020. So this used to be a pretty automatic thing. We had a 3% price increase almost every year on February 1st. And the departments in my territory are pretty used to that, knew it was coming, budgeted in their capital budgets for that. And I would work with people, I mean, this is a process. I would work with people sometimes a full year, and you know, we'd get it all set and January 1st would hit and they'd be ready to go. They'd sign a contract in January. The truck would be built by September of that year. They'd get it in time to train. So we used to offer prepayment, we still do, incidentally. We offer prepayment discounts, but it made a lot of sense if people had the money in January to pay Pierce, and they would, you know, pay interest on it till delivery. And at points in time, that interest rate was as high as 5.5, 6%. The interest rate today is only 2%. And I cannot, in good conscience, tell you to give Pierce your money for 3 years at 2%. I'm sure whatever you're doing with your money is better than that. They do offer a chassis discount, so if you pay for the chassis when that's completed, which is about 120 days before delivery, so still 3 to 4 months before delivery is still good, probably 30 months out. There's a $13,300 or $13,600 discount available, and the chassis is usually about half the cost of the truck. So it'd probably be about $400 and some thousand, and that would be, like I said, 3 to 4 months before delivery that they would bill you for that. If you want to see how we got where we are, I just took some trucks and kind of some trucks where I had basically sold the exact same truck. So in Appleton, I sold a truck in January of 2020 for $728,000. And in January of this year, they bought the exact same truck for $795,800. And this year alone, so if you take the prices from this year in January, I sold a truck to Nina Menasha for $673,250, and they are having a board meeting this week to approve a duplicate of this before the price increase, and it's $856,800. And that's, so in 2020, we had a regular 3% price increase in February, and then we had metal surcharge costs start coming in during shutdown and supply chain issues. Then in 2021, there was a 4.5%, and then that surcharge was still kind of fluctuating. This year in February, we had a 7% on February 1st. On May 1st, we had another 7%. On October 1st, Cummins Engines, which is our main engine that we use, had a 13.5% increase just on the engine. So that equated to about $13,000 to $14,000 depending on what engine was in there. And then on November 1st, we are going to have a price increase of 6.5%. And I mean, it sounds crazy, and I keep thinking it'll stop. It has to stop. But the reason, honestly, that it hasn't is it's really tied to our backlog. So in January of 2020, our backlog was 10 to 12 months. So when I sold those trucks in January of 2020, I still was working on a 9 to 10 month lead time. Because of shutdowns and COVID, those lead times leaked out a little longer, so some of them got closer to a year. But by last January, in 2021, we were up to 18 months, and after that price increase, when we went into this year, in 2022, we sold over 1,000 trucks in January of this year. And our lead time immediately went to 20 to 25 months on pretty much every product. And then in May, that price increase led to a longer backlog, and it was 25 to 28 months. And like I said, now we were at 30 to 32 a month ago, and now we're at 32 to 36. And so Pierce just can't reasonably say we can just keep the price where it is, status quo, because we're talking about trucks that we are not going to build for 3 years. So it's frustrating, and I don't know when it will end. I have to assume it's going to taper off, but people keep asking me, well, do you think they'll come down? And I'm like, I don't think prices ever really come down. You know, we're having to get more employees, and we're having to pay them a premium to get them, and we're not going to in 3 years tell them, okay, by the way, you're going to have to take a pay cut. You know what I mean? Those costs, I think, are probably fixed. I think the lead time will come back to normal, and we'll probably go back to normal price increases, but I kept waiting like the last 2 years, like this can't just keep happening, and it does. So I printed off some of these if anyone's interested in sort of these timelines. I just used a couple local departments that I've sold the same exact truck to basically at different times in the process. And then I also, just for fun, looked at the Velocity platform that you bought in 2014, which was $956,000. And I looked at a similar truck today, and it was $1,595,000. So they're, I don't know, they're not coming down. Anyone wants any of those, help yourself.
Are you ready for questions?
Sure. What do you got?
I don't have any questions.
Before that, can you, a little bit about yourself, like, just how long you've been doing this for?
So long. I own the local dealership for Pierce, so we're the northern 2/3 of Wisconsin. My dad owned it before me.
Were you Mike's daughter?
No. Scott Niles?
No, Scott, Mike Reese used to.
Oh,
he was a trustee at Ripon College.
Yeah, he was at Pierce itself. My dad and I own the local dealership.
The local dealer.
Yeah.
The one in Appleton?
Yep. It's in Appleton. But so is the plant.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this. My dad worked at Pierce when I was a kid, so I worked summer help on the lines when I was in college and interned in sales and marketing, and have been doing this ever since. So when I say I've never seen anything like this, I have a lot of experience to speak of for that. And it's been a kind of a wacky couple of years.
Anybody have any questions?
So I'm looking at price 121 from January to 20, we're saying?
So that was January of 20, and then 21, and then 22, and then they started ramping up this year. And the lead times and actual increases associated are below that.
So, say, 2018, these prices were significantly lower. So maybe around 600,000 for a truck like this?
Yeah, I would say like
Yeah.
in 2018, 2019, that is kind of that would have been, and I put on there like, what I'm seeing right now, and we have currently, just my dealership has 50 trucks on the backlog, and that mean or average price on it, just on a custom pumper of any sort, is sort of between $700,000 to $800,000 like a year in the last year or so. And just this year, those numbers have kind of ramped up to, I mean, we sold Freedom, puck pumper tanker kind of like this for $900,000 in January of this year. So I remember the first time that I sold a platform that was close to $1 million and thinking that, oh my gosh, that's the most expensive truck I've ever sold. And now I can't, like, I mean, when somebody asks me what a platform is going to cost, I'm like, I don't really want to quote those numbers. I mean,
So if we get in before the price increase, over the next year or two, because it's going to take 2 years to build it, like
three.
3 years. I'm hoping to, 3. But over 3 years, that price of that rig, what do you think a savings to that is realistic?
Well, realistically, buying it this week versus after Monday is Tuesday is $52,000.
Yep.
Just between now
Yep, because
and the
that's
first.
I calculated the price increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're saving that much money on Tuesday. We've saved that much money if we
Right.
put the order in on Monday.
And then 3 years from now. 2
Right.
years.
I mean, even if we just went back to 3% increases for the next 3 years, you would save, 3, 6, and 9. Doesn't come out exactly to that, but yeah, to your point, I work with so many fire chiefs where I'm constantly updating their capital budgets or their insurance replacement costs. So they'll call me every, fall and say, hey, this is what I've got in the capital budget. Am I still on track? Is it still good? And, I'll run the numbers and I'll say, yep, that looks right. And I used to have an Excel spreadsheet that would just calculate the cost, and I could put a truck in and 3% a year, and I could just sort of calculate it out. I even had years where we had emissions changes on engines and NFPA updates, and this year it was of no use, that program. There was no way that you could calculate and have, present values mean anything. But I had so many chiefs call me in the summer to update, their budgets going into budget season, and I'm like, no, that is not gonna work for you. And they're like, well, I had the town of Neenah call me, and they're like, well, if we're gonna, it was a new chief, and he said, well, I've never done this before. He said, what should I put in there? So I'm kind of, running some numbers by him, and he goes, well, if we're gonna replace this truck in 2025, when should we start? And I'm like,
No.
right now. Like right now today, actually. Because everything I'm selling right now is gonna deliver in 2025.
Right now, Ripon would have to bond for a little over $680,000 for this truck.
What was that, Ellen?
The Ripon would bond for $681,450. So we'd have to work with the city administrator in the 5-year capital improvement plan to determine when to bond for that. If it would be in 24 or 25 or whatever.
looking at a new truck back in 2016 would have probably been a huge.
Gee, you think?
Absolutely, but how do we know that? No, we didn't know we'd be there.
Nobody expected a pandemic.
No, I mean, it would be really great to have had a crystal ball. It'd be great to have a crystal ball right now.
Yeah.
People like, I get a call every day. Well, what do you think interest rates are going to do? Well, what do you think, price increases are going to do? I was like, geez, if I knew that, I would not be doing this.
What was, I just threw this out there to the board before, and that was, our one's 35 years old, and then the other one's 33 years old, and it's only 3 years, or 32 and 30. So what, if we wanted to say, we want another one in 4 years, can we lock in at that same price for 4 years?
You can lock in, if you sign today, you can lock in the price, but we really only have maybe negotiating power to move it up, not back. So, like, if by the time I would put a contract in for you, it would be, let's say it's at 35 months. I might have the ability to move a truck up depending on engineering options. We have some slots, they're called Build My Pierce. They're trucks that are more based on what our stock units used to be or when we had them, just more standard options. And there's a few slots and they require less engineering, and we do more engineering at front and we get a little quicker lead times. We're usually able to shave off. I sold some in the beginning of this year when the lead time was 18 to 20 months, and I was able to get some down to 14 months. I was asking a couple weeks ago, specifically for a customer that was in a bad place with a replacement, and we had some that were available at 22 months, I thought he said. But when I asked yesterday, I sold the truck last night to Town of Oshkosh, and that was another one that they were kind of hoping to get in an early slot. And I sent in their cost this morning. I hadn't heard anything by the time I left, but they're just filling up. So there's some slots, but they're probably further out than they would be. I do not think that Pierce will hold the price longer than our backlog, just because who knows what's going to happen after November 1st. To be fair, our backlog could go over 3 years depending on how many orders come in this week. Which is basically what's happened to every one of these price increases, is that we hit it and I think, oh great, I could get a nap and get my hair done. And then they announce the next price increase and I'm like, okay, back at it.
So there is no savings to do with that, really?
Well, there's probably an engineering savings. It used to be calculated at like a 2% savings if you would order two at the same time, and they would go down. The savings is really more in them going down the line back to back, because if we're doing special options, we're doing them in a sequence. But to be honest, I have not.
And I guess I didn't mean savings, I meant
Yes.
time-wise.
Yes.
It's
Oh.
not gonna happen.
We would not be able to delay.
Okay, so I think you answered.
Yeah.
You answered that.
Might be able to move one up and leave one at the
Yeah.
standard delivery time, but we would probably not be able to delay that
Okay.
delivery time and today's pricing.
Any other questions?
Just on the truck itself, how much water does this one hold then, or?
This one is $750, but we have an option in for $1,000 if,
That's
another thing the
what
committee
we
is
were
still.
discussing was, $750 versus $1,000. And there wasn't much of a price increase for $1,000,
No.
so that's what we would be looking at.
And so to explain how we got here into this number and why it could come down is also because I've just learned my lesson this year with when the build time was 9 months, trucks that I sold in one price level were often still in that price level when I did what we call our pre-construction meeting, which is when we get our detailed engineering drawings like this and engineering questions. And that's when the committee will sit down with me and we'll sit down with engineers at Pierce and kind of go over all these details. Well, it wasn't a big deal to make changes at that point in the process because that point was usually 3 to 4 months after you signed a contract. Well, now so much of that backlog is just being in line, basically. So we probably wouldn't get to that pre-construction meeting for 2 years in some of these instances. So I am being like so careful to make sure I have everything in that a department has requested or discussed, because I don't want to get to that meeting and them say, oh, well, that's not what we wanted. We really wanted this bigger cab, and then it's like a change order where I'm taking out something that was 2 years pricing ago and putting in something in that time's pricing. And it's only started becoming very evident to me in the last month or so, because I've done some pre-constructions for trucks that were sold before our January price increase, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I wanted to change an engine for somebody, but that between 2 price increases and a 13.5% price increase, it was so much more expensive to go down in horsepower than to just stay where we were, that I had to tell the customers, like, you don't want to do that. Let's just stick with that.
Go ahead, Mike.
So basically, next Monday, if we decide that we're buying this truck, all the bells and whistles that are there is what's going on in the truck. And if they want to go look at in 2 weeks and say, we don't need that electric remote shooter, that's an extra expense to take it off, right?
No, well, so first of all,
or anything else.
Right. I really would want them to be able to go look at things hopefully before Tuesday. I'm hoping they all have big plans to go visit their neighboring departments this weekend, actually. But yes, so my biggest concern is the big ticket items that are, you take out a cab at $60,000 and put in a different cab, and it might have only been a $5,000 difference, but to your point, in 2 years' time, we're talking about different prices.
But that's right, I guess that's where I was getting at.
Yeah.
Between all the different compartments for
Right.
their equipment and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, they want to change it,
Well,
they better have what they want
right.
now.
So my point is, we can delete and it'll be the same price that it would have cost today. Like, I'm taking it out at the same pricing. But yes, we don't want to add things in 2 years from now pricing. And we don't want to make, Tim's like, well, what if we want to change body styles? I'm like, no.
No, but to your, whether it's next week.
Right.
The big ticket items I can see. But
Right.
we're at and I told her, when I saw the price, I was a little shocked, but I called her and I said, so this is the worst, this is the most, because this gives us all our needs. If we go in a week or two and we say, you know what, we can't look at, our committee doesn't have time to go in the next 2 weeks, we go look at the deck gun, we can take that deck gun off there.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're not even in pre-construction.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. But
And there's no fee to take that
there's
off.
no fee to take it
Okay.
off, but if we're adding something back in, it's gonna go in the next price level. So, say we take that,
Oh.
that's the part that, yeah. We can take,
Yeah, that's
You're gonna
sure.
take out the deck gun and put the light towers on.
Yeah.
right, so
Yeah.
that's the piece where I'm just like trying to be.
We need the duck gun.
Didn't you
Are we sure?
just say a little bit ago that you can take it off, but it'll stay at the price that we agreed on?
Right, so
If you're taking it
You're
off.
not-
if you're taking it off, you get a credit for whatever it is. But if you add back on, like for instance, in this case, we take off the electric deck gun at today's pricing, but we put in the manual deck gun in next week's pricing, but in that scenario, you're only paying 6.5% more on one item, this manual deck gun, as opposed to this whole truck. So I've been doing that. I just did one for Oshkosh, the city of Oshkosh, that was several price increases ago, and I was panicked about it because the chief basically just signed a PO for this truck without letting the committee weigh in, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be terrible, and they got into a faster slot, but it was still 2 price increases. And so to go back and help them make changes and delete things in old pricing and add things in new pricing, and we were able to make some changes at a net zero cost.
Okay, I had a few questions.
Yep.
About this truck, what kind of chassis does it have? Is this supposed to be a good chassis? Has it been around a while?
Yeah, it's the Velocity chassis. It's the same chassis that's on the platform, but it's been redesigned since then. I think it's our best chassis.
And I have some maybe technical questions.
Yeah.
Like, so Pierce makes the chassis?
Correct.
How long does it take him to make the chassis after they get the order?
Well, so
Or is there some just that they make and then?
no, so they're all built per customer spec because, you know, for instance, on this chassis, it's the longer crew cab, you know, and, you know, you can have cabinets in the rear piece of it, in the center piece of it, anywhere that there's a seat, there could be a cabinet. So they're built per customer. So if this truck is on order for, let's say, 30 months, it will only be metal for the last 5 months of the process.
So how long does it take them, once they get the chassis together, how long does it take to put the cab on and all these other stuff? Is that months?
2 months, yeah.
2 months?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know,
No, and
it's
they,
not like building a Ford.
no, and they come in, I mean, they come in as frame rails, you know, we order the
Okay.
frame rails, they're E-coated at our Oshkosh facility to prevent corrosion, and then they come to Pierce and they have the axles and engines and transmissions and hydraulic lines, everything, I mean, it's all done in
Maybe you can tell them how many trucks Pierce puts out in a day or a week, finished
about
trucks.
10 a day.
Finished product.
Finished
Finished
trucks.
trucks, yeah.
Right.
So like the night we were there, the blue floor was full of trucks and those trucks mostly were gone the following day, so.
And would there be a problem ever if you wanted to take
No.
come with me and take a tour?
Absolutely,
or
yeah.
whatever, he can- Okay.
We
Yeah.
should do that. That's-
I was just interested, you know, it sounds to me like it would take weeks or months to put one together. You know, they're not like a Ford, you know?
No, it does take,
They're all
you
a little
know,
bit different.
they are all a little bit different. And like I said, this has been a challenge. And I think that they were all feeling the pressure from me as I was pushing them around.
There was lots of things to look at and, you know.
I was
the
really
time
trying to
was-
keep them
yeah.
focused.
It was overwhelming.
Yes, it was. But, you know, we were trying to, we had talked to her prior to that and told her these are our needs. And so she took us specifically to vehicles that had these things that we were looking for.
Yeah, I was
And so,
very,
you know, we were going, oh, that's a nice.
I
and
know.
she'd keep going, come on. You know, so we were, she was trying to keep us all focused and we were seeing all these other things that, you know, really look nice too and,
So which Cummins engine is it?
so we actually decided to go with the PACCAR MX-15 engine on this. It's a little bit cheaper than the Cummins and the stability and the pricing has been better on than Cummins.
Cheaper engine, I'll tell you that.
You don't like it? So this is a
It'd probably be
new,
good for a fire.
yeah, I was gonna say,
You know,
they've
if I'm driving,
been,
if I'm pulling semi down there, other piece.
yeah. Well, so for the purposes of this kind of vehicle, the biggest thing is torque, you know, not horsepower when it comes to like getting up and going and whatever.
You're not pulling
No,
40 ton down the road.
we're not.
Yeah. So,
And the Packard engine, we did, like, you know, Fox Crossing, we talked to them because they're buying an engine. They just switched from Cummins to Packard. We did talk to our mechanics and renters who usually work on these things. Everybody said they're a great over-the-road truck motor. And that's why when they were seeing a lot of Packard motors being built and being used, we're saving a ton of money. I don't know.
Well,
They're about $30,000.
$30,000.
Per engine.
Yeah.
You know, it's just-
Well, this engine, so is
You're going
500,
to keep a truck for 30 years anyway, so what the hell, might as well buy the engine.
it's a 515 horse, but it's a 1750 torque, which is a a pretty nice power supply for this particular engine. If the thing is, like, a number of years ago, Cat went out of the fire business. We had an exclusive dealership or partnership with Detroit. And Oshkosh Corp having, big buying power between all the subsidiaries, Pierce and all the other ones, we're able to sometimes get these partnerships with other engine manufacturers, and that's why we've not had to raise prices on trucks on order, because honestly, I think that our people are really good at pushing back at suppliers. And if you just drive up and down American Drive near Pierce, like, every supplier has a storefront, because we're the largest manufacturer of fire trucks in the world, and same with Oshkosh. Everything around it is geared toward supplying those places, so that helps us. And
I have a question. Do you need that big engine in there?
well, so since the emissions standards, they just don't have the same pickup. And I've just had so many complaints about.
They don't smoke.
No, that's true. But I've had a lot of complaints, and we're doing a lot of things with the rear axle ratio and limiting the top speed to try to, like, City of Oshkosh, for example, for them, it was just embarrassing. They're like, we can't pull out of the station if a car is, because we can't get up to speed, and so,
It's a lot of weight.
back in the day, I mean, we used to sell all those Series 40 Detroit engines that were 330 horsepower, and those trucks ran fine, but it's not the same.
Right?
Yes, they did smoke.
Well, we should probably take one more question, because we have to
Yeah.
go into a budget workshop
Yep,
yet.
yep.
So does anybody have one last question?
Go ahead. I asked questions, but
No, well, please ask. I just wanted to, as a double check, maybe this doesn't have to count as a question, is that I heard you say that this is why we haven't had to raise it. So are we locking in our price?
Yes, you are
On the
lucky.
31st.
Yeah.
Or that traditionally you haven't had to raise it on
No,
orders?
so I don't know if you've heard any of this, but in the last 2 years, I have lots of customers that have been affected by this, had trucks on order with other manufacturers, and they've come back to them and basically said, yeah, we need, $100,000 more to finish your truck. Pierce has not, since 2020, we have not gone, even that Cummins increase, that only affected orders that hadn't been put in. So if your truck was on order, had a Cummins engine in it, we did not go back to those customers and ask for 13.5% more. We have not done that in process to this point. So I feel very confident that that's why we haven't had to, is because we're having the forethought to say, oh, our backlog is now 3 years, we have to have another price increase, because we won't be able to build any more trucks at this level of pricing.
So it's not an action item tonight. It's an action item on the 31st, because the order has to be in by midnight
On the
31st. Mike, did you have one last quick question?
kind of, just in the whole scheme of things, are there other areas, like you just mentioned the engine? I'm not sure if you have different transmission options. What about even pump options? Are there better and worse different pumps?
So
and stuff like that? And
the puck pump, which is what we have configured in here, is our pump, so we have a lot of control over that. We have it cast at another manufacturer that builds pumps, but it's our pump, so we have all the control over that. It's our chassis, so really the only pieces that we don't have control over are the engine and transmission. And I feel pretty confident with that. Like, we've weathered this now for 2 years without having to impact any customers. Allison just had a pretty significant increase. Again, that did not get passed on to customers. So I feel pretty confident about the components. There have been things in the last 2 years that have just we grow over air horns just went away. They just went out of business. But our people in purchasing were really good at finding suppliers that would meet those orders and do it for the same price. So we've had some hiccups like that, but nothing that's taken us down so far. And gosh, I think we've got to be nearing the end of it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I have cards here somewhere if anyone wants to thinks of other questions that they want to ask me, feel free to reach out to me directly.
You sell internationally?
No, I only sell in Wisconsin. Fond du Lac County is a, big county for me,
If
so.
anybody wants to go,
Yes,
it's a cool place to see.
And if I'm not
And
trying to get everybody focused, I will give actually a really good tour. I did not have time that night for,
And we'll have to take some more trips up there anyway.
Yeah.
So, if you have the interest, let
And I
us
know
know.
previously when we've ordered trucks, we've taken board members along, to
It's
go through
always-
the process, just, it's
Not
really,
to build, just to,
it's a real interesting place to look and see.
yeah, after I've been married for I don't know how many years, my in-laws were in town and I don't know, I had to run to the plant for something and my mother-in-law must have asked my husband if I would give them a tour and they still talk about that to this day. They're like, I just don't believe how much you know about fire trucks. I'm like, what do you think I'm doing all that? I really appreciate your time and I hope that we can get something done before midnight next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Safe travels.
Let's take about a 5-minute break to go to the bathroom and stand up. Okay, Chief, you want to go ahead and
Sure.
give us the overview on the budget?
yeah, so I'm gonna jump right to the total and the increase in the budget, and then we can come back if there's questions. But on the last page is a budget detail sheet I gave you. It's, this year's proposed budget is $631,906 compared to the $571,228. How I came up with that and balanced that budget is for the revenue end of it. Obviously, there's you'll see from fees for municipalities, we figured in a 1% increase. And then the fire call fees, that was at 75,000, but we put that back to 60,000. I thought that was more of a realistic number, based on the number of calls divided by $100, when a lot of our calls are more than $100. And then in addition to that, we're just changing our software, our reporting software. We've already changed it, but we've only changed it for the incident reporting, but it will keep better track of our billing, and our billing will get better, so that's why I think that's a realistic number. And then the fund balance applied, the $51,425 would be from the levy money that's in the money market account,
The fund balance.
the fund balance. So that's how I came up with and balanced the budget. So it's a zero budget, and except for the 1%.
So the other thing
Fee
is,
for
too,
municipalities.
before we approve the budget next week, that you have to decide if you want to move the fire call fees have to come, you have to make a separate motion to bring it out of your capital revenues to operational revenues.
Yeah, that's for you guys to
But I'm just
decide,
letting them know.
but I put that in there because we had talked about that. Like, that's operational, that's where it really belongs.
Right, but the
So-
board's going to have to vote on that separately before the budget is approved
Okay.
next week.
Well, I missed some of that, but, so you're saying you're gonna take the full $400,000?
No. No, you have a capital, you had a capital revenue budget in the past, and then your operational, and you had the fees were going into the capital. And we're just moving them out of that up into operational. It's not touching the fund balance. The fund balance is the
But the-
51,000.
But the call,
Well, just a second.
okay,
Last week you said we had $400,000 in money market.
Yeah,
That's not getting changed,
yeah, that's the 51,425 is being applied.
so you're bringing 51 out of there.
Yeah,
And then we'll probably, if we get one of these guys, we're gonna take the 25 or
whatever.
out of there. So we'll still have money left in there.
You still have a couple thousand. a couple $100,000 in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from, but that
It's,
was
you know
supposed to
what,
go in the
you know
capital.
what, it's happened all over this city. The library has the same issue, they have over $500,000. They have $200,000, we're not, I'm not gonna get into this.
That's
with you.
outside of the agenda for tonight.
It's part of what's going on all over the city. You had past practice to put money levy into a money market account, but this is not the only,
I was just curious.
it's not the only, it's the city did some
Well, I'm
questionable.
not blaming anybody either.
No, it's the city. It's the city. It's been the practice to do this, and it's not a good practice. So it's how things have been done that shouldn't have been done that way, and it's the city's responsibility. But that's why you're finding levy in fund balances, because it's been a practice of the city to do that. So, but that's not, the capital thing is, it's in a different revenue line in the budget, how it's been set up. So we would have to make a separate motion to move that revenue line into operations. And that's the 60,000. And then approve the budget if you so choose.
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about 51,000. You said 60.
The 60,000 is for the fire call fees. That's
Oh,
where we
okay,
have to make
okay.
the motion to move it from the capital revenue line to the operational revenue line.
Okay, he's changed that from 70 to 60.
75 to 60.
To 60.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, Chief.
No, you're fine.
No, I'm just trying to stay on the same page.
So that 51,425 is from the money market, that was from our past savings from previous years. And if we did take money out of that, that means we would be having a balanced budget?
Well, then you could either cut expenditures or you could try to increase your levy, but the city's only budgeted 1%, really 0.84%.
So we're lucky we have that money.
Well, because this is the same conversation we had last night. Because if you're taxing somebody with levy, with property tax, you're taxing them for operations for a fiscal year. It is disingenuous to take any savings and put it in a money market account and then ask for additional levy the next year. Because you haven't spent what the taxpayers gave you to begin with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I understand that.
Well, I'm asking other folks.
Yeah, I understand it.
Okay.
I mean, if you guys got questions, that's it. Some of the things, we did cut out of the budget for the hose testing, the maintenance to the station, the cleaning. Those were the things they took out, which helped.
But they're still going to be done.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
The duty people do those
Yeah,
things.
we don't have to pay
Correct.
for them because they're going to be
Correct.
done by people who are already on duty.
Correct.
There are some changes in the detail. There's a $30,000 increase for the paid on premises fire from $85,000 to $115,000. There's also an increase for the fire chief for wages as well as insurance. There's also an increase for retirement from $8,000 to $12,000 because you have a gentleman who will be increasing his hours that he is eligible for Wisconsin
No,
retirement.
he is eligible.
Okay, so that would then, I got an email into our attorney because that may trigger additional benefits that that person is eligible for, which we'll need to know.
For the salary, the increase, that's what percentage?
I don't know. What did you do, chief?
I'm sorry,
What did you do for the increase for the chief?
3%.
3%.
Okay.
And then there was an increase to, obviously, the on-call. I forgot where you left off here. to the on-call pay.
Yeah, you had gone through that with us already.
And
3% is pretty, it seems to be a standard cost of living. How did, right, I mean, how did you come up with that? Is that why?
Because that's what Ripon is
that's
giving
what the
their-
city
Mm-hmm.
was given,
I
so
think that's also what the police union,
I-
I think that's why they came up with that too, I think.
I don't know how they come up with it.
But anyways, yeah.
And then there was an increase to health insurance.
And you haven't had an increase since when?
20, well, I've gotten a additional money towards my insurance, but never a raise per se, since approximately 2016, I think was the last one.
16 or 18, I think.
Were you gonna say something, Larry?
Well, the chief was given an increase towards his insurance
Okay,
every year.
okay.
So I was given a bonus, and
Well, depending upon
you could say a bonus.
what the word is,
I don't know.
well, and the reason that it was done that way,
It was influenced more directly because it went directly to his insurance, his health insurance, because if he would have just taken the raise, he wouldn't have got as much going
Right.
towards the health insurance.
Okay, well, so you guys can still change, I mean, so how did you give a bonus? Did you just applied it to the health insurance?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Correct.
Well, this, you know, you can do whatever you want with the budget.
In the end, you know, you might say his salary looks better, but he'd be paying more out for insurance, so it was just more advantageous to go that route.
Yeah, so there is an increase in insurance in here. It's a $4,800 increase in insurance. So that package would be, that would be a 3% increase and then almost a 50% increase in insurance. Or is that, am I looking at the right? There we go. Yeah. 40% increase in insurance and a 3% increase in wages. And this was just added, so it's up for discussion.
And right now, you know, right now I pay $433 something per paycheck for insurance. And I can't afford to pay more than that for insurance. So the increase was $400 a month. And that's just, I can't afford to take $400 more out of my paycheck when I just can't do it. So,
Wait, say it again, your health insurance went up by $400 a month?
yeah,
When? Starting when?
yeah,
Starting when?
January 1st.
Will start or has already started?
No, we'll
Last?
start January 1st. So, and I have some paperwork for you or you guys, to go over and sign. But, again, you guys can take it apart, take it away, whatever you want to do, but, you know,
How do we, or forgive me for not knowing this.
I feel-
When do we go out for bid for health insurance? I mean, do we ever?
He
it's
doesn't.
different.
He's on the state line.
Oh, so this,
And
yes, you're
and I'm
probably
only
state.
one single employee.
Yeah, got it.
So,
So you're already in the state plan, yeah.
yeah. So this year I did put in for the insurance money and a 3% raise. I haven't had that raise and health insurance money for a long time.
Would you all like the chief to step out and discuss that?
Sure.
Do you mind stepping out for a couple minutes?
Yeah, you can step. You
No,
stay,
he
why
can
can't you
step
stay?
out. Okay, you guys, it's okay, we can't go into closed session.
Huh?
We can't go into closed
Oh,
session,
okay.
it's not on here. I didn't realize this was coming.
Well, what we've done before sometimes is
Mhm.
we've approved the budget and then we decide what we're paying.
So you would approve the budget next, you can't,
You can approve the budget Monday.
yeah?
All we're doing is approving the budget, and then you can do the chief and the salaries after that. He's just proposed this, and this is the budget, we accept it. Doesn't mean every dollar's gotta go where he said it had to go either. I don't think have we ever done the chief's salary and stuff, say, before we've done the budget?
I think every
We've
year.
always
he's
approved the
always
budget
trying
and
to
done
give
the.
himself a raise.
Done it.
Well, see, yeah, this is
We've-
the first time I've seen.
We've gone into the closed session and then done the salaries for the chief, what we wanted to do.
Right. Every year he's put in a
Okay.
raise.
So I need your help on this. So the point is, because I like to work with this overhead sheet, but if you want to keep it the way it is, and then discuss in closed session how to do this, it would change, we could then change the fund balance applied to reduce what we take out of fund balance if you reduce those numbers as presented. Is that what you would do? Is reduce the
We
revenues?
would have just had a surplus someplace if we didn't have to readjust the budget later. Because you can adjust this budget anytime you want to.
Right, you do a budget adjustment, yeah.
Yes. So you would have had it left over, and then maybe that's where some of this 400,000 came from, I don't know. But, you know, no, what I'm saying is, we can approve his budget.
Okay.
This budget's all right.
Is
So we get into closed session, we decide, okay, you know, we
So-
can't do that much.
Okay. So we
It
would
still
go
doesn't make any
into,
difference, why would you have to adjust the budget immediately? Let's
Okay.
go through the year and see what happens.
okay. So then in December, do you decide then
What he's gonna get.
what he's gonna get?
Yes,
It was December or January, wasn't
or November, but we're not meeting in November.
No, because we're meeting on the 31st,
Right. So I.
because that's our budget hearing.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't see a problem either approve this budget or not approve the budget. Doesn't mean we have to approve the salary,
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
okay, that's how you've done it in the past? Okay,
Yeah, and we decided on the chief's salary and whatever we're gonna do in closed session.
that's typically where you would do it.
Yes.
I didn't know this was coming till today. So,
So he presented something differently than the past, or why is there the change right now like this?
no, they said that he does this every year?
he? Yeah, typically he's done that every year, he's sort of given himself a raise.
Uh-huh. But I don't remember having this
He-
conversation in past years.
Because we rolled the raise into, like, covering part of his health insurance.
Right,
last year.
that's where we.
Right.
Right.
So his salary stayed the same, but that 3%
Salary has to.
got
So
raised
is,
into.
you know, there's social security doesn't worry about this, I mean,
Mhm.
gains him a lot of traction.
Mhm.
And we did find him a different insurance carrier before, which saved a bunch of money.
Well, this
I'd
is-
rather do this in closed session.
Oh, yeah, I don't think we can do it tonight. Well, first of all, we don't have a closed session on the agenda, so.
Right.
But from a procedural standpoint, you're helping me understand what your past practice has been. Because I've not done a budget that way before, so I wouldn't know. Okay, all right. So, you want, Barry, can you go get them? Sure. Please?
I'll get it.
You'll get them? You're special.
That's right.
I don't understand why
I don't
he's so
think
upset
he's
about this. Seems silly. I don't know.
What, because he wants. But I don't know, I mean, it's, I don't know procedurally how you've done it in the past. And I don't think it's appropriate to Okay, sorry about that. They explained to me procedurally how they've done the budget in the past, so I got it now. It took me a while, but I got it. So, how would you all like to proceed? Is this,
Nope.
do you want any changes to this, or do you want this for the budget hearing next week? It balances.
Do you need a motion to,
No, we don't.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. So, everybody okay with presenting this to the, yes, sir?
All right, so when I'm looking at this, no, that's wrong. I was gonna say, we went up from, I'm wrong, I've got it.
You talking to yourself,
We
Gary?
just went up 10%,
For,
basically, because we had 571 was our budget last year, and
oh,
this year it's gonna be 630.
Wait, do you need a motion to move the fire call fees though in operations today?
the fire call? No, we'll do it next week after the public hearing. Well, we could probably do a motion to present this budget at the public hearing, if you'd like to do that.
Sure. I move to present this budget in public hearing.
Okay, is there a second? We're all talk at once. Because then next week, after the public hearing, is your last kick at the can.
I'll second it. I'm sorry, I'm writing this down.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. That's hard to participate.
I'm
in,
trying,
right?
I can't multitask quite like that.
All those in favor of presenting this for the budget hearing next week, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okey dokey. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Well,
I'll
thank
second
you,
it.
thank you. All those in favor, please
Twist my arm.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So we'll see everybody at 6:45 next Monday for a public hearing.